sarve bhadrani pashatu ma kaschit dukha bhagvavet sarvastaratu durgani sarvo bhadrani pashatu sarvaha sadburimapnotu sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May all beings everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. We are soon approaching the full moon day of May, which is the thrice blessed day, and this Wednesday is the thrice blessed day. It's also a partial lunar eclipse, so it is bound to be a super auspicious day. And the thrice blessed day is the day of Buddha's birth, the day of his enlightenment, and the day of his final release from transmigration. So again, Wednesday, so offer him a cupcake. He loves pie, go for it. But it's a good time to remember Buddha and his teachings. It's always a good time, but it's a particularly great time now. Swami Vivekananda had tremendous reverence and love for the Buddha. Once when he was in America, some woman must have asked him some annoying question because he invaded to record him as saying, "Madam, I'm the servant of the servants of the servants of Buddha." So he had really great tremendous love and respect and had two very profound experiences of the Buddha, once when he was young and once when he was older. And Swamiji said about him, this great philosopher, preaching the highest philosophy, had the deepest sympathy for the lowest of animals. He never put forth any claims for himself. He was the ideal karma yogi. He did all of his work without any motive at all. He said he was the greatest combination of head and heart that ever existed. That's high praise indeed from Swamiji. You know, there's a lot of miraculous events surrounding the Buddha's birth. It is said that when the Buddha was born, the heavens rained down flowers, and the world was just flooded with light. And the moment he was born, the blind began to see, because they were so eager to see his glory. And those who had been deaf and blind regained their ability to speak, and they were able to hear because they wanted to speak about the glories that would come with the appearance of the Buddha. And all the ferocious beasts became tame, and everyone was flooded with peace as the whole globe was completely encircled with peace. Such was the profound blessing that had been given to the world with the birth of the Buddha. Now we can see this as mythological or metaphorical, or we can see it as literal. It doesn't really matter, because the import is the same, which is that the birth of one enlightened being completely changed the course of human history. One enlightened human being completely changed the world by the strength of his spiritual power. And he was a human being, and he insisted that he was a human being. He was, when he was asked, because, you know, after his enlightenment, he was so different. He was luminous, and he kind of radiated this tranquility and peace. They couldn't quite figure out instead of saying, "Who are you?" they'd say, "What are you?" They'd say, "Are you a god?" "No." "Are you an angel?" "No." "Are you a saint?" "No." "What are you?" And he said, "I'm awake." You see, he was deeply compassionate. That's why you see these long earlobes and all these statues of Buddha. That's a physiological sign that indicates compassion. He was deeply compassionate, but at the same time, he's extremely rational, extremely practical. And he wanted everyone to realize that enlightenment isn't for the favored few. It's not for the gods. It's not for saints. It's not for enlightened beings only. It's for all beings. Enlightenment is a human ability, because he came to the earth to relieve the sufferings of all, sufferings of everybody, not just even human beings. all beings. He took his birth to relieve the sufferings of all. Now, Buddha's birthday is coming up, but we're actually the ones getting the presents. And we love presents. That's why we like our birthdays. We get cake and we get presents. And even like when Amazon comes, ooh, a present. We love presents. But the problem is Buddha's giving us the presents, but we just may not want his presents. Okay, so let's take a look at the presents that he's giving us. Now, the first big present that the Buddha gives us is by reminding us that we're all going to die. Take back that dang present. That's not a present. Send it back to Amazon. I don't want that present. It's morbid. It's morbid to think about death. Besides, I've got a long time before I even need to think about it. Maybe not. Maybe not. That's the first present. Buddha's second present is to remind us that we're all going to endure sickness. Okay, you can take that dang present back too. I don't want it. It's a slap in my I've never been sick in my life face. Because I've never been sick. I've never thought about getting sick, nor would I get sick, nor anyone that I loved or cared about. That's right. None of us have ever been sick, and none of us even thought about Alzheimer's or having a stroke or cancer or anything like that. That's negative thinking. So we're not going to go there. I don't want that present. Third one is to remind us, in case we haven't looked at the mirror, that we're going to get old. And if we're old already, we're going to get older if we live that long. We are going to get older and older until we die. Now, Americans are great. We somehow think that if we work hard enough and we have enough hair, hair color and hair dye and enough liposuction and Botox or whatever, and exercise and positive thinking or facelifts and cleansers, lots of cleanses and special diets and no gluten, and have our own personal trainers, that somehow this is not going to happen to us. And we do not think too long or too deeply about it. We just keep on taking care of things. In the US, a lot of people now identify as being Buddhist. And that's great because it's a beautiful, fantastic tradition. But the problem is very few of them actually know much about Buddha or Buddhism. Now, if you tell them something about it, they're kind of shocked. What they know is like little things of what they picked up from His Holiness Dalai Lama or from Thich Nhat Hanh. Because when you ask them about, I'm a Buddhist, oh great, well, what do you practice? A compassion. Great. What else do you practice? Well, love and compassion, and I watch my breath. Okay. What else? That's cool. The problem, this is armchair Buddhism. And armchair Buddhism, like armchair Vedanta or armchair any other religion, won't be really helpful to us because it won't be there for us when we actually need it. Will be like that parrot Sri Ramakrishna talks about in the gospel. It's like you have a parrot and the parrot is taught to say Rama, 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 until a cat gets it by the throat and it's like, wah, wah, wah. And we'll be like that parrot. It's like spirituality unless our spirituality is actually integrated into our life and is like almost like part of our bloodstream, it won't help us. It won't be there for us. Because it's not real to us yet. We haven't made it a part of our lives. And that's the problem with any armchair religion. We have to get beyond armchair religion, which means we have to be able to get out of the thing of just listening to these ideas, listening to an inspiring video, reading a few things here or there on the couch. It has to be put into practice, because until it's put into practice, it's not real. It's not real to us. Now, this is where Buddha's presents to us come in really handy, because if we want them, because they're going to be there and they will be able to help us. And it's good to use them because they are all deal with the human condition. They haven't changed. The same issues that Buddha discussed 2,500 years ago are the same issues we deal with today. Nothing has changed. Once there was a young widow, and she had lost her husband when suddenly she lost her only child. She was beside herself in grief. She was inconsolable. She'd lost the only other being in her life that gave her love and that she loved. So she ran to the Buddha and fell at his feet and begged him, bring my child back to life. I know you can do it. And the Buddha was so kind and tender and gentle with her. And he said, yes, bring me a sesame seed from a house that is not, where death is not touched, and I will bring your child back to life. And so the woman went out quickly with great hope and knocked on the first door and said, my child has died. Do you have a sesame seed? Do you have a sesame seed? And if you could, my child will come back to life. So the woman said, oh, by the way, has anyone died in this house? Because if you do, then that sesame seed won't help me. And, oh, I'm sorry. My father died in this house 20 years ago. My seed won't help you. And then she ran to the next house, and the next house, and the next house, and the next house. And she'd gone to every house in the village. And it was their father or their mother or their grandmother or their grandfather or their sister or their brother or their child. Somebody in every house had died. And when she got back to the Buddha, it was late at night and it was dark. And she walked in and she was very downcast. And the Buddha was so gentle. And he said to her, oh, did you bring me the sesame seed? And she said, no, death has touched every house in the village. And it was then, and it was only then, that the Buddha began to teach her. Because then she realized she was able to see beyond this facade of life. She had her first lesson in really gaining wisdom. She was prepared then to be able to understand and accept the teachings of Buddha. I was really young when I first heard this story. I was probably 15, and I was so disappointed in him. I thought, come on, Buddha, I know you can do it. I know you can bring that child back to life. And this poor widow, how could you be so cold? I mean, Jesus brought Lazarus back to life. Why can't you pull it off? Jesus definitely has a better juju than you do. And then I thought about it more, as one does. And I thought, why didn't he bring the child back to life? Because the child's just going to die anyway. Maybe in a week, maybe a month, maybe 10 years, but the child is going to die anyway. As will the mother, as will Lazarus for that matter, as will Buddha, as will me and you and everybody else that we know. Everybody that you and I want to cling to, including ourselves, we and they were all going to die. That's why Buddha wanted to give her the teachings right then. This is the way it is. So what's the big present that Buddha gives us? The one that's behind the Christmas tree, the big one with a big wrapping. Go, oh, is that my bike? Could that be? The big present that the Buddha gives us is the ability to look at life squarely in the face and look underneath that pretty veneer, underneath that stupid facade that we go for, and to see the reality of life and to see it without fear. To be able to see it without fear and to be able to understand that knowing this makes our life more joyful, more rich. It gives us better understanding of what we have now. As a young man, Prince Siddhartha lived in a gorgeous palace, and his father and everyone there protected him from seeing anything that might be sad, anything that might upset anybody. And he had the finest silk clothes, and he had a beautiful queen and a handsome young prince, and the best food and the best ornaments and the best unguents to decorate his body. And he had an own troupe of dancing girls to perform before him. And he was protected from anything. So one day he and his chariot, he just decided, oh, let's go out and see the city. So one day very early, he and the charioteer go out just to see the city. And boom, 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 one right after the other, he sees sickness, old age, and death right in front of him. He'd been protected from seeing his whole life. And then he gets full throttle reality right in front of him. And he's shaken. He is shaken. And then he finds out from his charioteer that this happens to everybody. Every embodied being will experience sickness, old age, and death, assuming they live long enough to get old. Every being. So when Siddhartha returns to the palace, nothing is the same. He's no interest in the dancing girls, no interested in his beautiful clothes or all the things. Everything has lost its appeal, because once you know something, you can't unknow it. You can pretend it's not there, but you can't unknow it. Once you know it, you don't unknow it. Once he saw how totally ephemeral it all was, it all looked like ash to him. So he went out. Only when our young widow, once she'd gone from door to door, and once she'd seen how universal death and suffering and grief are, only then was she ready to be taught by the Buddha. So you know what? We all have this opportunity now, if we should want it, if we're interested in these presents, because Buddha's teachings are as applicable to us now as they were 2,500 years ago when he was born. Actually, now is even a better time, because with this wretched pandemic that has gone through the world, we're all sort of in that position of being that widow. It's like the amount of sickness and grief and death that have been visited around the whole planet right now due to this pandemic is really unbelievable. Especially right now in the land of Buddha's birth, North India, especially there, where it's absolutely rife, where every family has been touched in one way or the other. Every family. So we can just, rather than just like either wallowing in it or saying, ain't it a shame, we can actually bring this reality to bear in our own spiritual life. Bring this reality to bear on it, because it's very applicable. Buddha had such great compassion, but at the same time, he had a mind like a steel trap, razor sharp, and its perfect balance of head and heart. And with that, he gave us the Four Noble Truths. And these are our big presents, and we need them now, whether we want to admit it or not. Now, the first noble truth that the Buddha gives us is always the big deal breaker, because nobody wants to hear it. And it sticks in our craw because we don't even like thinking about it. And that is, one, the truth of suffering. Come on. What a year we've had, a year and 3 months of this pandemic, and I want to hear something cheerful. Please don't tell me about suffering, because I'm going to switch this off and I'm going to Netflix right now. So, there are pills for what you're talking about right now, and I suggest you take one of them. Now, Buddha wasn't one to throw out kind of vague generalities, and he certainly wasn't a depressive. So when he said the first noble truth is suffering, he's got it backed up. And because he's so analytical, he parses it like a scientist into 6 pieces. The first piece is the pain of birth. Now, we don't remember it, but all of us cried when we were born. Now, we were so warm and comfortable and safe in that nest in there, in that oven, and we didn't experience any anxiety, any worry, any depression. Everything was warm and safe and comfortable. We were nurtured and we were fed. Everything was taken care of. And then all of a sudden, out we go into that little narrow birth canal, and then out into the cold, cruel world where it is colder and crueler than we can ever imagine. And we discover it more every day. We can't go back as much as we want to. The only way, and the going forward doesn't look that great either. It's a cold, cruel world out there. And that's how we begin. Even worse, once we're born, then there's only one direction we're headed, and that's towards death. Day by day, minute by minute, step by step, tick, 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 tick. The clock is ticking. We don't know when, But there's only direction forward, and that's where we go. That's the way embodied beings are. So our life is headed in that direction. That's what he calls suffering. Second, the pain of sickness. Nobody wants to have cancer or Alzheimer's or a stroke or COVID. Nobody wants to have COVID. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to have paranoid schizophrenia. No one wants to have intractable bipolar disorder or depression. Nobody wants that. Now, illness means pain, either physical or mental or both, because a lot of times with physical pain comes mental pain. You know, it brings our mind down. When we're sick, we're in pain. Third, the pain of getting old. Now, America is wonderful because we think if we try hard enough and we work at it hard enough, we can avoid the whole issue. Because with the plastic surgery and the Botox and all that and the dye and the dental implants, that we can look 20 years younger. And indeed, we can. If we work hard enough at it and do it, we can look 20 years younger. But it's all a fraud because it's an appearance. It's still, the clock is ticking, tick, tick, and we may appear to be younger, but we're not. We're not. We can tighten our face so we can't make a facial expression with the Botox, but it doesn't stop the hand of time. Nothing does. So we can deceive others and maybe even try to deceive ourselves, but again, it's just a fraud, and this is suffering. The march of time means that death approaches, and that's painful with the pain of getting old. But even more than that, nobody wants to be unwanted. No one wants to be unneeded. No one wants to be decrepit. Nobody wants to be creepy. Nobody wants to be that person in the corner in a wheelchair bent over, you know, with Depends or not being able to eat, you know, having baby food. Nobody wants to be that person. Nobody wants to be pitied. Nobody wants to be dependent on others. We feel young inside, and so we think that everything should go along with that. But again, it's self-delusion. My mother used to say, honey, but I feel so young. Mom, you're not. You're old. You're really old. We have to be able to do that with ourselves. Stay strong. Stay a good mental attitude. But remember, old age is there. 2,500 years ago, Buddha saw all this, and he analyzed and he said, this is suffering. Now, we can stave it off by various tricks, but the truth is, old age is suffering. Buddha said, look at it squarely in the face and know it for what it is, because then you can go beyond suffering. Fourth, the pain of death. Now, the pain of old age and illness is just kind of the trailer. It's the preview for the big movie coming up, and that's the pain and the fear of death. Now, we may think that we aren't afraid of death. We may think, oh, that's fine, but I'm a spiritual person, so I'm not afraid of death. But our self-confidence may be overstated, because if we're actually faced with, you know, a person going careening at us on a car, like, oh my God, that guy nearly killed me, which means, you know, we might not be as, you know, as chill as we think we are. Carl Jung said that he found in his patients over 40 that death was the greatest fear. And that was every patient over 40. And I really do think that is overstated. But it may be just because I live in my own little bubble of people who are, you know, spiritual aspirants. I don't know. But you can tell the people fear death because of what they're going to endure to avoid it. I mean, people who are very ill will go through all sorts of torture and will live with nausea and pain just to stay alive, with a 2% chance of staying alive a little longer, 5% chance. And we'll have to endure all sorts of a terrible living just to be able to have a little more time in this body. Whoa. And then we have phobias, the fear of flying, the fear of driving, the fear of heights. Why? Because we think that death is at the end of that stick. I fear of flying because the plane might go down, and then we all die. Yeah, well, that's fear of death. Now, we can't blame anybody or shame anybody or ourselves for a fear of death because it's very deeply ingrained in the psyche of every being. If you try to kill an ant with your finger, that ant's going to run away. You try to kill a grasshopper, that grasshopper is going to try to escape you. We have, in this human body, we have died millions and millions of times. So we have a deep impression of our mind of pain that goes along with death because oxygen deprivation, it's usually not that easy to just get out of a body. So we have that. I'm sure some of you have heard the story from me before, but I'm bringing it up because I like the story. But it's a true story. I was in India in the 80s, and Swami Bhuteshanand was the president of our order. And a monk who was much senior to me came in and was beside himself with grief. And he fell at President Maharaj Swami Bhuteshananda's feet and said, "Maharaj, I'm so ashamed of myself. I'm so ashamed of myself." And said, what's happened? What's happened? And he told the president of our order that he had been a pilgrim up in the Himalayas, and he was in one of these wretched Indian buses. And if you've ever been one or been too close to one, they're very unsteady, and the mountain and the roads up there are sheer. And if you get too many people, they fishtail. And I myself and Gita Pran have been on one of those, faced with one of those buses, we thought our last minute had come on the planet. It's like, say your mantra, here we come. Well, this that he was in, a bus had gone over the embankment, down the hill, and gone into a river. And he told Swami Bhuteshanandaji, he said, "I didn't once think of the people around me. I didn't once think of God. All I could think about was getting myself out of that window. I didn't think about anybody else, the person next to me. All I thought about was getting out of that window and getting out of the water." And he cried and said, "Maharaj, I am so ashamed of myself." And Swami Bhuteshanand just said, No, do not feel ashamed of yourself. It is a perfectly natural response. He said, death is an instinctive thing, and you have to be extremely spiritually evolved not to be able to have that instinctive fear of just staying alive, getting that air in your lungs. Don't feel bad. So that we should not be hard on ourselves if we notice it in ourselves, and we should certainly not be hard on others and think, oh, well, that guy's afraid to die. It's like, of course, it probably hurts. The pain, the fifth one, shows you what an extremely observant and analytical mind the Buddha has, which is the fifth one is the pain of being tied to something we dislike. So you think of the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner where the albatross is put around the mariner's neck and it kind of is stuck there, and as it's dead and it just keeps getting deader and deader and deader. That's why they say it's an albatross around her neck. Well, we all have, well, not all of us, but many people have albatrosses around their neck in the form of something we dislike that we can't get rid of. That might be a relationship that's very painful to us. Maybe it's a mother or a father or a sister or a brother or a child that we have a relationship with, or a spouse or an ex-spouse, that we can't undo the relationship. It is there, but it's extremely painful. We can't cure it. We can't fix it. It is there, and it is an albatross around our neck. Maybe the albatross is an illness. Maybe it's an illness that we were born with. Maybe it's a mental illness. Maybe it's a physical illness that we got in birth or we got later on. But it's something that we can't fix. We can't cure. It won't go away. A lifelong disability, perhaps. Maybe we're tied to our own addictions. Maybe it's alcoholism or drug addiction or some other unwholesome addiction that's like a monkey on our back, but we can't get rid of it. It eats at us. It destroys us, but we can't get rid of it because we're addicted to it. That is what the Buddha called suffering. Buddha recognized this, said this is suffering. The sixth, pain of being separated from what we love. Pain of grief, pain of separation, the pain of attachment. It always will come to us that we'll be separated from those we love. if not by, like when our children go away to college, we're left with an empty nest. When we separate from our loved ones, maybe a marriage or a relationship breaks up, it's very painful. Maybe our child joins the armed forces, or maybe they just become adults and start going on their own way. And the little person that we knew and loved becomes different, or that person that we're married to becomes different. And the pain of separation. Two sticks go down a stream. And after a while, the stream separates them and they go on their different ways. Well, that's the way life is. Life is a stream. Nothing stays the same. Because when we die, we don't, like, even if there's a global catastrophe and we all go, the path of our own karma is leading us in different avenues. We're not going to go all together. So when we are separated from that, whatever we're attached to, the universe pries our hands open, and that's painful. And that, the Buddha said, is suffering. Okay, so there is our first truth. The first noble truth is life is suffering. This moves us into the second noble truth, is that truth of the origin of suffering. Because if we want to fix something, we want to know, okay, well, how do I deal with this? He said the origin of suffering is ignorance. Okay, we talk about this a lot in Vedanta. Ignorance. Ignorance, not like not knowing our times tables or Sanskrit grammar. Ignorance of our real nature. Ignorance of the truth of life. He said the origin of suffering is ignorance, and ignorance leads to desire, or his word for it is tanha, the Pali word. And it's a specific word because it just isn't just like any desire. It's selfish desire. A desire, it's like selfish gratification desire, like my things, my joy, not the desire for enlightenment doesn't qualify as tanha. The desire for the happiness and welfare of other beings doesn't qualify as tanha, but your desire for private fulfillment, private gratification is tanha. Why? Because it increases our egotism and it increases our selfishness. It makes us think we don't think of others. And what Buddha again and again emphasized, first of all, is tanha increases our private ego, makes us bigger and bigger egos, doesn't lead us to think of others. And the Buddha said that life is one. We should think of all beings as extensions of ourselves. Just like Holy Mother said, no one is a stranger, my child, the whole world is your own. Or what Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself. We're all to see all beings as an extension of ourselves. So if we're gratifying our private little desires and keeping my money, my things, my desires for ourselves, we're going against that. We will suffer. The third noble truth, the end of suffering. Now you're talking. Let's get over this depressing topic. He said suffering can be overcome. Great. Which leads us to, bingo, the fourth noble truth. The path to the end of suffering, which is, again, analytical Buddha here, the eightfold path. And the Buddha says, if you follow this path, you will get what you want, which is happiness. Because the Buddha, it's like, this is kind of like a doctor's prescription. He gives us, okay, this is pain. This is what you're suffering. Yeah, this is your suffering. Yeah, this is how we get you out of it. Yeah, there's a cure. The cure is this. And he gives us this eightfold path as your prescription. But the problem is, he's not going to give us the happy pill. He's not going to say, do this and take this and I'll do this for you. Believe in me. No way. Buddha said it has to be cured by our own efforts. No one can eat for us. No one can drink for us. It has to be done by our own efforts. We have to do the work ourselves. But he said, if you do it, you are guaranteed happiness. Okay, we have a deal here. So here's the prescription that he gives us. The first one is what he calls right view. That means we have to understand, we have to think, we have to use our mind to really understand what our position in the world is, what the truth of life is, and why we rationally need to do and engage in our spiritual life. Because Unless we start by thinking right, nothing else is going to go right either. We have to really get our mind in order and understand what we are thinking, what we believe in, and why it's necessary to do it. The second one is right intent. Getting our heart on board with what our head has decided is a good idea. Because we have to engage both the head and the heart. They can't be going off in two different directions. We have to really emotionally agree that this is what I want and really analyze. It's like, am I saying one thing and doing another? Am I really cutting myself off at the knees here? Or do I really believe, do I really want to do this? So one has to be sincere. Sri Ramakrishna used to talk about making the lips and the heart the same. Mon mok ek have to go in the same direction. Third, right speech. Now, this ancient Vedic prayer that we talk about here, we hear chanted here fairly often was, may my speech be one with my mind, and may my mind be one with my speech. O thou self-luminous Brahman, remove the veil of ignorance from me that I may behold thy light. And then it goes on to say, may I speak the truth of Brahman. May I speak the truth. May the truth protect me. Truth is so important in spiritual life. Speaking the truth to ourselves and speaking the truth to others. It's super, super important. And truthfulness is absolutely critical along and balanced with kindness. So we can't speak a truth to injure somebody, to get back at them, to try to wound them or in some way. We have to be really, Buddha really emphasized motive. We have to be aware of the motive behind our speech. We also have to be aware of what we're saying. It's like we just can't rattle off and say whatever comes to our mind because we don't even know. We have to be aware of what we're saying and why we're saying it. Fourth, right conduct. Ethics is absolutely essential, or else it's just a house built on sand. We absolutely have to make our actions completely in line with what we say we believe and what we think we believe and what we say we believe. It has to be going in the same direction. So we can't, and Buddha gives us these things to follow to have a completely ethical spiritual life. First, don't kill. Okay, I can do that. Third, don't steal. All right, that sounds all right. Yeah, sounds like good. Third, don't lie. Okay, even at work, even to your boyfriend, don't lie. Fourth, here we get into a problem. Don't be unchaste. Come on, this is America. This is 2021. Don't be unchaste. What does he mean? Being completely faithful, thought, word, and deed to the partner that you are committed to. That's why. Because you can't be acting like a hound dog or catting around. Because your actions have to be in consonance with what you are committed to, which is an ethical life. Because everything is about mind control and self-control. Without that, we can't get anywhere. And the fifth one that Americans are really going to hate is don't take intoxicants. What? Why? It's so fun. Why? Because you can't control your mind if you're intoxicated with drug or drink. If you're intoxicated, you can't control your mind, you can't control your speech, you can't control your body. And that spells disaster. That means you're falling off the path. You know, I'm a chaplain at Cottage Hospital, and I'm the Hindu chaplain, which means I don't get called very often at all. But when I was down there, I asked the people in the ER, I said, so how many of the people who come into the ER are coming as the result of alcohol or drugs? And they looked at each other and then kind of had a sad laugh, and they said, well over 60%, if not much higher, well over 60%. You know, for a little bit of fun with the drugs and the drink, that's a lot of people dead. That's a lot of people badly injured. You know, control of mind, control of body, control of speech, self-control. Fifth, right livelihood. Some occupations are completely incompatible with spiritual life. That means you can't be an arms trader, you can't be a drug dealer, you can't be a poison peddler, which includes, if you're a meth dealer, you're basically dealing poison. You can't be a prostitute or a John. You can't sell alcohol to alcoholics. You can't do any occupation where you use other people, where you deceive other people, where you lie to other people, where you manipulate other people, or you use their sufferings as a way to get ahead yourself. It's not worth it to sell our ethics down the drain. We just heard from a close devotee of ours, who was very close to Swami Swahananda, that one of Swami Swahananda's disciples worked for an insurance company. And she told Swami Swahananda that her entire job at this insurance company was to delay the payment that the insurance company owed this person as long as they possibly could. To delay and delay and delay for this person who needed the money, who was owed the money, they had paid into the system, and they were suffering because that money wasn't coming to them when they needed it. But that was their job. That is not right livelihood. Swami Swahananda was so shocked that a job like that could even exist. How could a job like that even exist? And that people would apply to get a job like that because they needed a job. That is seriously it's not right livelihood. We have to be able to look at the mirror in the morning and not be ashamed of ourselves. That's kind of the basic thing. Can you look yourself in the mirror and say, yeah, I feel pretty good about what I do. I feel pretty good about what I'm doing with my life. That's right livelihood. Sixth, right effort. In order to succeed in spiritual life, we have to use our will because it isn't always easy. And the Buddha was always about self-effort. He said, work out your own salvation. Don't depend on others to give it to you. Work out your own salvation. All of us have a strong will. We just don't always use it in the right effort. If any child is stuck under a car, that mother or father is going to lift that car. If we're running a race, we have a will to end the race. If we really want to fit into that dress, we're going to lose 20 pounds. We have will, but we need to apply it to our spiritual life. But the Buddha also said, use your will to stay on the path, but don't be like the lute, because a string can't be so taut that it breaks or so lax that you don't get a sound. You just get a plunk out of it. So we have to engage our will, but keep the effort strong and steady and be patient with it. Seventh, right mindfulness. The Buddha really, again, stressed self-effort. So that means, what are we thinking of? Are our minds going in the right direction, or are we thinking about, what are we thinking about right now? Are we thinking about selfish desire, selfish fulfillment? Are we thinking about, what are others thinking about me? Or am I thinking about what I'm going to do? What am I thinking right now? Is it going towards my enlightenment, towards my spiritual growth, or am I going against my spiritual growth? He was very strong on examining your mind all the time. In the Dhammapada, which is the collection of the Buddha's teachings, the first thing says, we are all that we are is the result of what we have thought. Our life is shaped by our mind. We become what we think. Suffering follows unwholesome thought, as the oxen follow the wheels of the cart that draw it. Joy follows wholesome thought, like the shadow, like the shadow that never leaves. It's so beautifully poetic. Joy follows when, like a shadow that never leaves. That is with wholesome thought. Unwholesome thought brings in its train suffering, like the wheels and the oxen that draw it. It's inevitable. One leads to the other. Therefore, the Buddha said, look at what you're thinking. Look at what you're thinking. Examine your thought and say, is this doing me good or is it doing me harm? When we examine, because most of the time we're going outside so much, we're not even aware of what we're thinking. Just all of a sudden we're like, okay, calm down. What am I thinking about? Finally, right concentration, number 8. We all know how hard it is to meditate. No one's unique in that. But unless we do the first 7 steps, it will be impossible to do the 8th step because the mind won't be under our control. The whole time we're going to be playing tug of war with our mind because we haven't done the first 7 steps. Swami Prabhavananda used to say, don't baby the mind. Like, don't go into cat space. Just staring and relaxing the mind is not meditation. Just going off and thinking anything you want to think is not meditation. Keep the mind on one object, put it there, and concentrate it. Because unless our mind will then be calm, because unless the mind is calm, we won't be able to see the world as it really is, and we won't be able to understand our own mind, let alone trying to understand the motives of others. He said, if we go and concentrate on one object and concentrate there, we will get joy and tranquility as a result of that. Joy, tranquility, and peace is basically all any of us ever want out of our life. Joy, tranquility, and peace. Now, this is basically the 4 noble truths. And no matter what religious tradition we are part of, all these are applicable to our spiritual life. And the more that we are released from what the Buddha called the 3 poisons, which are ignorance, craving, and aversion, the more we'll be able to do these 4 noble truths, the more we will be able to get that joy and tranquility and peace. That's all that we want for ourselves and for others. If we can do that, our life will be a blessing to ourselves, and it will be a blessing for others. Buddham sharanam gacchami, dharmam sharanam gacchami, sangham sharanam gacchami. I take refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Dharma. I take refuge in the Sangha, the holy monastic order. Om, peace, peace, peace be unto us all. And if there's any questions out there, I'll be happy to take them on. Devi Prana, I was thinking of you because we not only have Buddha Purnima on Wednesday, but last week we had Shankara's birthday when Swami Asheshananda would be in bliss thinking about Buddha and Shankara at the same time. Nothing made him happy than talking about Shankara and Heisenberg. And then, of course, Buddha. He loved the teachings of the Buddha. So thinking of and Wade, these disciples of Swami Asheshananda, this whole time he would just be like such a happy camper. As he used to repeatedly say, quoting the Buddha, all compounded matters bound to decay, with a great flourish of his chutter. So any questions or arguments? Poxes upon me for these presents.
You said, love thy neighbor as thyself.
I'm sorry, can't hear you very well.
You said one time, love thy neighbor as thyself.
Yes.
So can I add to that? Indian philosophy is saying because yourself and you are one.
Yes. Swamiji said, love your neighbor as yourself because your neighbor is yourself.
Oh, okay.
As only Swami Vivekananda could say so brilliantly. Good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other? Okay, well then, everyone have a good rest of your day. Thank you for joining us here. have a happy Buddha Purnima on Wednesday and have a happy week. And this coming Wednesday, we'll still be in May, so we will have the reading of the Eternal Companion at 4:30. And then on Saturday, we will be having a reading of the Gospel of Shamakrishna at 5 p.m. And Sunday, we're still not in June. So beginning in June, we will be able to have lectures here in the temple in person, everyone, of course, masked and sanitized from here to Kingdom Come. And we'll have every other seat blocked off, but it will be comfortable and it will be nice. And people will be able to attend then the Eternal Companion will be Wednesday at 5 p.m. and the Gospel on Saturdays at 5 p.m. And again, people will be able to attend with masked and sanitized from here to Kingdom Come. And our speakers will be in person then. Swami Mahayogananda will be giving the first talk the first Sunday in June at 11 p.m. His topic is something fairly interesting, actually, but I can't remember it because I'm 69 years old. That's why. Okay, look it up online. I can't know everything. Okay. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.